Shalom Aleichem, let's get started. Be'ezras Hashem, we're beginning today Samach Aleph Amud Aleph 61a in Maseches Berachos. We're nearing the end of the Masechta, Be'ezras Hashem. We're going to begin the top line of the page, Ve'amar Rav Huna Amar Rav. We're going to have three sections in today's learning. The first section really ties back into yesterday. Rabbi Akiva who said, Kol da'avad Rachman l'tav avad. We're going to get back into that a little bit. The second section is a fascinating discussion and debate about the way Adam and Chava were created. And then the final section we'll get to is going to be discussion about yetzer hara, how to deal with women in general, certain distances that are necessary, as well as we'll start talking about today the body and the organs and their functions. As Hashem, let's get started. The top of Samach Aleph Amud Aleph. Now yesterday we had left off with a story about Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva's expression that he used to vocalize was Kol da'avad Rachman l'tav avad, that whatever Hashem did was for the best. Kol da'avad Rachman l'tav avad, which means he understood, and we brought a story based on the story that he understood whatever was done was for the best, even if we don't necessarily understand it. So the Gemara here picks up with a similar discussion of Amar Rav Huna Amar Rav Mishum Rabbi Meir. We said the name of Rabbi Meir. A person's words should always be minimal. Now, really what it means is measured, Lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in front of Hashem. Meaning when something happens, he shouldn't immediately cast castigations against Hashem or say negative things, because perhaps he doesn't necessarily understand how this is for his betterment, and really it is. Like it says in Koheles, Shlomo HaMelech tells us, Al teval al picha, do not be overwhelmed on your mouth, that you blurt something out. V'libcha al yemaher, don't be quick in your heart. Lahaitzi davar lifnehu elikim, to emit something in front of Hashem. Ki elikim b'shamayim, because God is in heaven, ve'ata ala aretz, you are on earth. Al ken yeyu devarecha me'atim, your words should therefore be minimal or measured. Meaning when you respond to some sort of an incident and you want to say negative things against Hashem or about Hashem, chas v'shalom, realize you don't necessarily understand the full picture. Hashem knows what He's doing, and based on that, we shouldn't necessarily just respond out of haste to say negative things about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If something that we don't understand happens, who knows what the real reason is. Now moving on, the Gemara now starts a fascinating discussion about the creation of man. Darash Rav Nachman bar Rav Chizda. What does it mean when it says in the pasuk, "Vayitzer Hashem Elokim es ha'adam"? It says Hashem fashioned man, b'shnei yudin, and it says Vayitzer with two yudin, with two yuds. Why is it written with two yuds? So the Gemara says Shnei yetzer and bara HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The idea is that Hashem created two inclinations or two natures in a person. Echad yetzer tov, one is the yetzer tov that wants to do good. The echad yetzer ra, and one is the evil inclination, pulls man to do things that are not good. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says, I don't understand this. Because according to what you're saying, when it says that Hashem created animals, it doesn't say vayitzer with two yuds. There's only one yud. Less la yitzar, and you want to tell me maybe he doesn't have a yetzer ra? The problem with that is we know, as the Gemara is challenging, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak is saying, animals sometimes can be very docile, could be very calm and good and easygoing. But we know also that animals we see sometimes they damage, they bite, and they kick. So l'chayre, they also seem to have these different natures of being good and being bad in the loose sense, obviously. So asks the Gemara, if yud, two yudin implies this two types of natures, well then why isn't it written that way by animals? So Ella the Gemara says, you're right, really animals could have this inclination either way. But the reason it is two yuds is a different reason. Ella k'derei Shifman ben Pazi, Damar Shifman ben Pazi, oili mi yotzri, the oili mi yitzri. Really, the idea of having two yuds symbolizes the word vayitzer actually refers to two beings, you could say. Yotzri, my fashioner, the one who fashioned me, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and Yitzri, my inclination to do against Hashem. Woe to me from Hashem, and woe to me from a yetzer hara. Meaning, I'm being pulled in two directions, and if I don't follow after Hashem, so then I'm punished. And if I don't follow after my yetzer, so then I have all kinds of hirhurim, negative thoughts. So that's the idea of two yuds. It symbolizes the struggle that man, and purely man, has to struggle with, this difficulty where he has this conflict of interests which animals don't have. Animals, they're ruled by nature, their instinct. But man has two yuds to symbolize that he has this inner turmoil, this inner struggle. Do I follow after yetzer or after yitzri? Inami, alternatively, could Rabbi Yirmiyah ben Elazar, another way you could darshan the two yuds. Dom Rabbi Yirmiyah ben Elazar, like Rabbi Yirmiyah ben Elazar says, we're going to see this is a machlekes coming up. Du partzuf in Berachos Baruch Hu b'Adam Rishon. Hashem created Adam Rishon with two faces. As we're going to see, this is going to be one of the two shitas how Adam and Chava were initially created, which was two beings back to back. Adam and Chava, as we're going to see. That was the way it was initially created. Shene'emar, as the pasuk says in Tehillim, Achor v'kedem tzartani, behind and in front you created me, symbolizing the fact that Adam was actually created with two faces, like a two-faced person, back to back. Adam and Chava were created together. So that's Vayitzer with two yuds also is a reference to this idea that there were two creatures that were ultimately separated to form Adam and Chava. Now that we introduced this, the Gemara moves on to discuss this idea of how Adam and Chava were actually created. So the pasuk tells us, "Vayiven Hashem Elokim es hatzela." It says Hashem took this tzela, this side of Adam Arishon, and he built it. Now, what does it mean? So Rav Shmuel. So there is a machlekes amoraim here how Chava was fashioned. Really, how was the initial creation and Chava was formed? Chad Amar Partzuf. So one says, like the previously implied shita, which is that there were two faces or two people back to back. Hashem separated them, creating Chava. Chad Amar, and the other of the Amoraim say Zanav. No, that actually Adam was created with a Zanav. This was the tzela. It was a tail, and Hashem took that tail and he built that into Chava. Bishlam Lamanda Amar Partsu. If I understand, according to the Manda Amar, it says there was two people and they were separated. Hainu dechsev achor v'kedem tzartani. So the pasuk in Tehillim we quoted above, we could explain it. Behind and in front you created me means initially Adam and Chava were created as one being with two heads. Hashem separated them to form Adam and Chava, back and front. El Lemanda Amar Zanav my achor v'kedem tzartani. But according to the other shita, who says that Chava was formed from the extra tail of Adam, so how would he expound this verse of behind and in front you created me? And for the Gemara, Kid Rabbi Ami, Rabbi Ami achor lemaisa bereshis v'kadam lepor anus. Rabbi Ami expounds that the pasuk is implying man was created achor lemaisa bereshis. He was created the last of all of creation, and v'kadam lepor anus, the first to punishments. Now, Bishlam Achar L'Maisa Bereshis, I understand what it means. Man was created in the last vestiges of Maisa Bereshis after everything else. What does that mean? Because we know man was only fashioned on Friday, and the rest of creation had already been made. So that would make sense. Achar L'Maisa Bereshis, the last of all of creation. Indeed, man was fashioned last. Sfarim talk about why man was fashioned last. One way that's brought down is because it symbolizes the fact that if we do the right thing, so all of Ma'aseh Bereshis was there for us when we were created, but if we do Averis, we do the wrong thing, even the fly was created before us. So it's supposed to symbolize the fact to keep us in check. But either way you learn, it's true, Achor L'Ma'aseh Bereshis, Ela V'kadam L'Por Anus. But what does it mean man was the first to be punished? Por Anus Demai. What type of punishment is that referring to? If it means in the story when the Nachash seduced Chava into doing the wrong thing, man was punished first. We know that that's not true. Because Vahatanya, the Brisa says, Rabbi teaches a Yisait. Begedula, when it comes to meeting out good things, greatness, you start with the greatest individual to receive good first. But when it comes to meeting out curses, you start with the smallest creature. When it comes to meeting out good things, you start with the greatest creature, the chsiv, like the pasuk says, after the death of Nadav and Avihu, Kadosh Baruch Hu commands Moshe to command Aharon and his remaining children, Elazar and Isamar, about their unique avelos, how it was different, because they still had to bring korbanos. So their mourning was different than everyone else. And the pasuk says Moshe, and then Aharon, then Elazar, then Isamar, to highlight the fact that actually when it comes to meeting out greatness, in this context, the tzivoy of Hashem, a mitzvah, you put first the greatest person and then the lower people as you continue. So that's in terms of meeting out greatness. But but says the Gemara, we know when it comes to curses, you start with the smallest creature. How do we know? Because first the snake was cursed, actually the Psukim imply this, and it says very clearly, and then Chava, and then Adam was cursed. So ask the Gemara, it can't mean that first man was punished is referring to Adam being punished after the sin of eating from the tree he was not meant to, because we know he was actually cursed last. Ella, so the Gemara says, rather, what does it mean the first? Kedem in the pasuk refers to the fact that Adam was punished first. Or anas demabul. It means that Adam was punished, mankind was punished first in the flood of the Mabul that destroyed the world. How do we know this? Because it says in Parshas Noach, Vayimach es kol hayekum asher al pnei ha'adama. It obliterated, erased all of those things that stood on the face of the earth. Me Adam ve'ad behema. First it puts Adam, and then it puts behema. So Bereisha Adam v'hadar behema. First it puts mankind, and then it puts animals. Symbolic of the fact that first man was punished with the Mabul, and then the rest of creation was. That would be how this Shita would explain Kedem is Kadam lip or anus. Continues the Gemara back in the Shitas, Bishlam Lamand Amar Partsuf. I understand according to the one who says that man was created with two faces and then separated. So that explains to us, like we spoke out above, why Vayitzer is written Berachos. It's 2 stars if you want to get it. That's why it says Vayitzer with 2 Yodin, like we spoke out before, because initially Adam and Chava were created back to back, and then they were separated. Elamanda Amar Zanav my Vayitzer, but according to the Shitu, says that mankind was created with a tail. Man was created with a tail, and then it was separated to make Chava. So what's the Vayitzer, the 2 Yods? So the Gemara says like the other answer we gave above, the first answer actually. Rishon ben Pazi, the Amar Rishon ben Pazi, Oiloi mi Yitzri, Oiloi mi Yitzri. Samach Aleph Amud Aleph, 61a. So the idea of 2 Yods, according to the Shitu, says Zanav, would be that there's this conflict of interests which constantly challenges a man in his struggles between serving his yetzer, serving Hashem, and then struggling with his yetzer, or Chas v'Shalom caving into his yetzer and then going to be punished by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Continues the Gemara. Bishlam Lamanda Amar. The yetzer hara.
Not necessarily the yetzer hara. There are 2 yetzer.
That's true. Middle of the page. It's come out middle of the page. The first words in the line are Oiloi mi Yitzri. Samach Aleph Amud Aleph. 61a. Bishlam Lamanda Amar Partsu. If I understand, according to the Shitu, it says man was created with 2 faces, meaning back to back. That's why the pasuk says male and female, they were created, because yeah, indeed, it was male and female, and then they were separated after. Elamanda Amar Zanav, but according to the Shitu, it says that Adam was created with a tail. So what does it mean? Male and female, he created them in this plural language. Answers the Gemara, Rabbi Yavo. Rabbi Yavo Rami, because Rabbi Yavo posed the following contradiction. Ksiv Zachor Nekeva Bar Am. On one hand, the pasuk says male and female, they were fashioned in a plural language. Viksiv Vikibitzalim Elokim Asai Adam. It also says in the pasuk that in the image of Hashem, he made Adam. Hashem made Adam singular. So which one was it? Was he fashioned male and female, or just Adam? Ha Ketzat. So how is this? Betchila Allah b'machshava livrais beis. Initially, HaKadosh Baruch Hu thought to create 2 creatures, male and female. Ula b'saif, but according to the Shitu, it says Zanav. In the end, lo nivra le'echad. He only created Adam with a tail, and then afterwards he turned that tail into Chava. Bishlam l'mad amar parts. So if I understand, according to the Shitu, it says man was created in 2 forms, male and female together. Hainu dichsiv. That's what it means in the pasuk. Vayiskor basar tachtena. After removing Chava, according to this Shita, he sealed up the flesh under it. Now, if you remove a significant portion, which is Chava, so there would be some necessity to fill in. It makes sense. Vayiskor basar tachtena. But the Gemara thinks to itself is, if you just remove the tail, what was necessary to fill in? This was like an extra appendage. So what does the pasuk then mean? Hashem did a toiva for Adam, and not only did he take the tail and make it into Chava, but he filled in the scar so that there wouldn't be a remaining memory of the fact that Chava had been from the tail. That would be perhaps a negative thought, and he made sure that there would be no remnants of that, no scar.
There's something there too.
Something there too, definitely.
There's a bone too that goes with the tail, the base of the bone. It's near the coccyx, which is the bottom.
There you go. According to the Shito, it says that man was created with a tail. So I understand why it says he built means he built Chava. He took this matter which was a tail, and then Hashem built that into woman. But if you go with the other Shitu, it says that it was created man and woman together. Why does it say Vayiven? Vayiven implies that he built something, but he didn't build anything. He merely separated two creatures. So the Gemara answers the Chavishim Bemenasya. The Darash Rishim Bemenasya. What does it mean? Hashem built that seila, that side into Chava. Melamed teaches us an amazing thing. Not only did HaKadosh Baruch Hu create Chava for Adam, but Shekil'ah HaKadosh Baruch Hu lechava, he braided her hair. He prepared her to look beautiful for Adam. Ve'evia la'Adam Arishon, and brought her to Adam Arishon. Shekein be'krachi ayam karin lekli'asa binyasa. Because over the seas, there's a place where they call a hair braider binyasa. So that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu did. Davar acher, an alternative pshat. Vayiven, Omer Rav Chizda v'amir lamasnisa tana. Melamid, what does Vayiven teach us? Hashem created Chava like a binyan yetzer, like a building of storage where they would store grain. Just as a storage house, a silo, it's narrower above and it's wider below, as Rashi explains, or the Gemara says, so it could contain the produce. Rashi explains is if it was wide above and narrow below, it would put too much pressure on the walls, causing damage. So the yetzer, the storage houses, are built with wideness below, narrow above. So Hashem also fashioned Chava and subsequent women that they're wider on their lower half of their bodies, so that when they accept the child and continue to grow the child, they have the capacity to grow it properly, which we know in Metzius, that is the reality. Women are built differently than men. We know that. Yeah. In the general sense. Yeah.
Yes. No.
The organs are different.
In the specific sense. No, not the organs. The shape, the width of the hip in relation to the shoulders. Men have bigger shoulders.
Exactly.
Have bigger
you need to grow a kid. You need space. Yeah.
But the space is vertical, really. It's not horizontal.
I hear. Okay, let's continue. We'll continue talking about creating Adam and Chava. It says he brought Chava to Adam. Amr Yirmiyah ben Elazar, Melamed, unbelievable thing. Shenasa Kadosh Baruch Hu Shushvin la'Adam Arishon. Hashem became Shushvin to Adam Arishon. Shushvinim are you call them the groomsmen, you could call them. But really what it means are the people who participate and arrange the chuppah and the celebration. Associates, thank you. He became Adam's associate for his wedding. Mekan lamid lamda Torah derech eretz. From here the Torah teaches us derech eretz. What does it teach us? Sheyachzer gadol im katan. That a greater person, a senior person, a greater person should make arrangements with a smaller person. B'shushvinus, when it comes to association and helping with his wedding. And not chas v'shalom look at it negatively.
It's a big mitzvah.
Big inyan. Take care of people. Are they lesser than you? Go help them.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Lamad Amar Partsuf. Now, according to the Shito, says that Adam and Chava were created back to back. Haimina Sagi Beresha. Very interesting shaila. Who walked first? Means if you have these two creatures back to back, so who walked and who was carried, essentially? So Amar of Nachum Bar Yitzchak Mistavr de Gavra Sagi Beresha. It's logical that Adam would walk first and Chava would follow behind. The Tanya, like the Brisa says, and we'll get into a new topic now, the final section here, about how you interact with women and yetzer hara. Very interesting halacha. A man is not supposed to walk behind a woman on the path, even if it's his own wife. And as we're about to see how we should behave if this occurrence happens. Now there's two different ideas here, really. One idea is if it's his own wife, it just seems to be it's not proper etiquette. Rashi says genai, it's considered disgraceful. But if it's an eshes ish, or a prohibited woman, walking behind could actually lead to hirhurim or isser, that's a different story. The nafkamina, as we're about to see, seems to be, is that if there is a situation that you're behind, you wouldn't necessarily have to do some sort of a tactic to avoid it if it's your own wife. But if it's a different woman who's perhaps prohibited, then as we're about to see, you'd have to figure out to resolve it. And the Gemara therefore says, Nizdamna lo yala gesher. If it happened to be that there's a woman in front of him on a bridge, so Yistalkenu l'tzadin, he should try to move to the side until he could pass by her so that he's not directly behind her. And the Gemara tells us a very strong statement. Anyone that walks behind a woman by the river. Now by the river, they would lift up their dresses, so they were immodest, so that they could pass without their dresses getting wet. So a man who walks behind them in that sense, and Rashi says here, regarding an Eshes Ish, married woman, Ein lo chelek la'olam haba, extreme statement here. There's no portion for such a person, because it's going to cause, in the next world, it's going to cause him bad thoughts, and perhaps Avera. Tan Rabbana says the Braisa, on this same note. If a man intentionally counts money out to a woman in order to look at her in a prohibited way, even if he has in his hands Torah and Maisim Tovim like Moshe Rabbeinu, he will not be cleansed from the din, from the judgment of Gehenim. Where do we find this reference? Remember in Mishlei it tells us, Yad liyad lo yanake ra. Even hand to hand will not be cleansed from bad, from Gehenim. What does it mean? Lo yanake medina shel Gehenim, which means Moshe Rabbeinu received the Torah from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Yad liyad. If he counts out money, and he tries, even if he has such Torah and mitzvahs, if he's counting out money to gaze at a woman inappropriately, he's not going to be cleansed from ra, from Gehenim. Amar of Nachman. Rav Nachman says a very interesting statement here. Manoach Ama Aretz Haya. Manoach was an Ama Aretz. Manoach was the father of Shimshon. Why was he an Ama Aretz? Because the pasuk tells us, Vayelech Manoach acharei ishtay. Manoach walked behind his wife. He didn't know the Gemara. The Gemara says you're not supposed to. Obviously, he was an Ama Aretz. Maskefler of Nachbar Yitzchak says, but wait a second. Elamayata, according to what you're saying, Gabe Elkanah, we know Elkanah, who was the husband of Chana and Penina, and he was a tzaddik. It says there too, he followed after his wife. You can tell me he was an Ama Aretz? Now Tosfos jumps in over here and he says, this is a pasuk that's not found in Tanakh, so we can't have this girsa. But V'gabe Elisha, similarly found by Elisha, the Chsiv it says, by the Isha Shunamis, he followed after her. Could it possibly mean he followed after her literally? Obviously, in these contexts, it means that he followed after their advice. That's what it was. That's not following physically behind them. So it could be with Manoach also, he followed after his wife's advice, not that he followed physically after her. Amar Ravashi, Ulamai Dika Amar of Nachman, Manoach Ama Aretz Haya. Now, according to what you initially assumed, Rav Nachman, Manoach was an Ama Aretz, Afilu Beirav Nami like Kara. Not only did he not know a Gemara, but he didn't even know a pasuk. Do you know? Because the pasuk tells us, Vatakam Rivka v'na'areseh, when Eliezer picks Rivka up from Haran and he brings her back to marry Yitzchak, it says Rivka and her maidservants got up, Vatirkavna ala Gmalim, and they rode on the donkey, on the camels, and they followed after the man. They were behind. Not in front. So not only did Manoach, the way you're assuming he was an Ama Aretz, not know a Gemara, but he didn't even know a pasuk. Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, strong statement here. It's better to walk behind a lion than walk behind a woman. Because if you walk behind a woman, it could tempt you to Avera. At least behind the lion, okay, you know, you get eaten up. But I guess it's not as bad.
It's not safe. Yeah.
It's expression.
It's expression. Isha. Better to go behind a woman. Akum. Now, akum here doesn't mean a guy. Akum here means Avodah Zarah itself. It's better to walk behind a woman than behind Avodah Zarah. The Farshim speak out, because if you go behind Avodah Zarah, you might be tempted to worship Avodah Zarah.
Participate. Yeah.
Exactly. We touched on this earlier in the Masechta. It's also brought in Rosh Hashanah, I believe. You shouldn't walk behind Avodah Zarah and not behind a shul when the tzibur is davening. Because if you do, it looks like they're davening and you're disregarding that. Seemingly, chas v'sholom, you're denying Elokei Yisrael, chas v'sholom. But v'lo amaran, the Gemara says it's only an issue to walk behind a shul and people are davening, ela delaydari midi, if he's not holding something. V'idari midi, but if he is holding something, a bag or a burden, le'eslanba, that's not a problem, because people see, it's not that he's denying Kadosh Baruch Hu, he's busy with something right now. We'll daven mincha later. Again, it's also only an issue if there's no other entrance. But if there is another entrance, people will just assume he's going around the other way. It's also not an issue. It's only an issue if he's not riding a donkey. But if he's riding a donkey, people will say he's busy with his donkey. He can't come into shul right now. And also, it's only an issue if he's not wearing tefillin. If he's wearing tefillin, everybody sees clearly except HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he's wearing tefillin, which is an ice on ourselves that we recognize Hashem, so that wouldn't be an issue either. Let's finish up here. Final points here. Amar Rav, yetzer hara daimel zvuv. Now, there's a lot to talk about here, but we'll learn pshutai. A yetzer hara is like a fly. V'yoshev ben shnei miftechei halev, and it sits between the two chambers of the heart. And there's 4 chambers in the heart, right? There's 4, right? Four. So it sits between 2 chambers of the heart. I guess in the middle. That's the expression here.
It's called the septum.
The septum. The septum. Thank you. I'll say the septum in your nose.
No, same. Also separation.
Because it divides. It's a wall in the middle.
Divider. Yeah. So the yetzer hara is like a fly and it sits in the septum. Givaldik. Shene'emar, like the pasuk tells us in Koheles. Zevuve maves yavish. Flies of death cause to corrupt. Yabia shemen rekeach. It putrefies the fragrant oils. Context over here that we're trying to say is, yetzer hara is like a fly that causes us to become putrefied because it causes us to sin. Shmuel Amar kimin chita hu daime. Shmuel says yetzer hara is like a kernel of wheat. Shene'emar, like it says, this is when HaKadosh Baruch Hu was talking to Cain. What does he tell him? Lepesach chatatz roivetz. Cain became upset because Hashem didn't accept his carbon, and he became upset. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, Lepesach chatatz roivetz. The entrance of sin, it is crouching. It means if you continue to be upset, it causes you to averis, that's when the yetzer hara takes advantage. So the word chatas can be interpreted as chita, wheat. So he says that the yetzer hara is like a kernel of wheat. What's the symbolism here? I'm sure there's something to talk about. Tan Rabban and Zok the Braisa. It's either like a fly or like a piece of wheat. Shtei klayas yesh bei ba'adam. A man has 2 kidneys. Achas, this is an interesting Gemara. Achas yayatzase l'taiva. One gives him advice to do good. V'achas yayatzase l'ra'a. And one gives advice to do bad. I was about this. If a person donates a kidney, donate the right one. Don't give the wrong one. Umistavra.
How do you know which
umistavra. It's logical. The toiveli amina v'ra'al l'smoilai. That the one who gives good advice is on the right, and bad advice is on the left. Tichsiv, like it says in Koheles.
Statement.
Amazing, huh? Exactly. Tichsiv. Well, the politics came after. Tichsiv, like the pasuk says, Leiv chacham liyamina, the heart of a chacham is on his right. Leiv kisil ismoilai, the heart of a fool is on his left. Now, I was just thinking from this is like, if you're going to donate a kidney, donate the left one. Keep the right one. You want to keep the right one. All right, we'll pick up tomorrow. We're going to continue talking about the organs. Fascinating symbolisms here in this Gemara. It's all right, we'll stop here at the bottom of Samach Aleph Amud Beis. We'll pick up tomorrow with Samach Aleph. Bottom of Samach Aleph Amud Aleph. Pick up tomorrow Samach Aleph Amud Beis. As Hashem.